Informed Sources is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES television.
Hello, Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. There was an angry disturbance in a downtown office building this week. Crowd members passionately yelled and taunted the building's major occupants. The police stood by nervously. What might have been just another day in the city council chambers revealed the desperation of the city's residents. Crime had robbed their civility. We'll examine the ongoing efforts to do something about local lawlessness, and we will also look at two conversion projects, one at the site of the former Brown's Velvet Dairy, which will contain short-term rentals, and there is a movement to restore the Municipal Auditorium, a building that was once an important part of Carnival. Plus, we will detail a controversial divorce filing by the wife of a New Orleans police officer. And in this, the week of Martin Luther King Day, we'll take a special look at the influence that growing up in New Orleans had on Andrew Young, who would become mayor of Atlanta and was a trusted associate of Dr. King. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Stephanie Riegel, staff writer for the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Lottie Joyner, assistant managing editor for Verite News, and Dave Cohen, news director, WWL Radio. And we are going to stay with Dave, talking about that meeting that went on at council chambers midweek. Kind of volatile.
Well, and not surprisingly, I think that many people expected that this being the first public forum, really, where since the new year began and the already skyrocketing violent crime in the city has gone to even more accelerated levels of violence, that people needed an opportunity to vent, to speak out, to say what they were feeling. In the first 2 weeks of the new year, we were averaging more than one murder a day, averaging 5 people shot in the city of New Orleans every single day, 400 cars stolen. That's one an hour to begin the new year. And at the same time, no indication of any hope that NOPD will be rebuilding its ranks. And in fact, that meeting started with a report on crime statistics, that there had been 19 murders in 18 days, that of the nearly 2,600 people who applied to be NOPD officers in this latest hiring push, only 25 were actually hired, less than 1%. And so that even laid the groundwork for even more volatile interaction. And that's definitely what we got.
And so the meeting was a special meeting of the entire city council, not one of the committees, but the entire council. And what was the exact purpose of that meeting? Just to give community members a voice?
Well, the members we spoke to prior to the meeting said they wanted the meeting, and it was for, each had slightly different reasons and different things they hoped to accomplish. But basically, it was to let the community know that the council is taking action and wants to do something about this crazy crime, and is initiating efforts to make that happen. It's part of the ongoing tug of war, back and forth, push and shove between the mayor and the council in a power struggle like we haven't seen in generations in New Orleans, of the executive branch and the legislative branch really at odds. And we heard from multiple council members before this meeting that the mayor is still not taking the crime problem seriously, in their opinion, and that they're trying to establish that they are serious about it. And all of this is going on with the recall effort in the background and questions of who would, if the mayor is recalled, if the voters remove her from office, who would then be the heir apparent? And I think we're seeing jockeying for position right now in the event that happens, but also sincere concern, obviously, for their constituents, for their communities, where crime, and it's touching every inch of the city of New Orleans in one way or another.
And when that new task force was created, I think the council felt slighted that they weren't included in that.
No doubt. And that was clear. They weren't even invited to the news conference to discuss the efforts to fight crime. The mayor shut them out of that. Sometimes she'll have one member there, depending on what but this time the council had nothing to do with it. So this was reactionary to that as well, no doubt, Errol, that they were saying, no, just because we weren't there on a task force that most of the council members have already expressed they don't think is going to be very effective. They wanted to establish, we're here, we're taking action. Nothing horribly earth-shattering or groundbreaking happened at the meeting in terms of nothing was passed. There were some ordinances on first reading that were introduced that will later go to the full council. But having the stakeholders there, hearing the reports from how bad the problem is, and getting an idea of what's happening in an effort to address it was really the goal. I think they accomplished that, albeit amidst people who either were very angry, were very frustrated, taking turns addressing the council. Although, I don't remember ever seeing a council president or a chair of a committee before limit commentary from the council members. Mm-hmm. And Morrell had to do that. He had to tell the council members, just like the members of the public only get 3 minutes, you only get 3 minutes on each topic. Because there was, I guess, in his opinion, some grandstanding or some unnecessary time being eaten up by council members.
Not by the council. No.
Imagine that. So it was kind of unruly there, and I know, Councilman Morrell was trying to maintain order as best he could. Was anybody arrested?
He insisted, and we have not heard of anyone actually charged with any crimes. He insisted from the get-go, and he said many times, no one's going to be arrested, no one's going to be arrested. But that almost opened the floodgates for people then to continue that behavior.
Test the waters.
Yeah, and people who hadn't even filled out a card to speak, which is how the process works. You fill out your yellow card, you present it to the clerk gives it to the chair or the president, and then when it's your turn, you get your 3 minutes. But people were just, coming up out of nowhere, taking the microphone and refusing to stop talking. Some expressing sincere concern and anger, others with conspiracy theories they wanted to present about why crime is so bad in New Orleans. And it got ugly. And then some people in the audience wanted some people who were speaking to stop speaking. Right. And we were kind of at a tipping point, but we never got over the edge.
But the meeting continued. They did not call the meeting. That's something that I heard
6.5 hours.
Say today they did. And so the Criminal Justice Committee is going to have a meeting next week, right? And they do want their own task force, do they not?
Absolutely. And I think we're going to continue to see this political struggle to determine who cares the most and who's actually doing something and who's most effective in trying to address the crime problem. And their agendas seem similar. At least what we hear from the Cantrell administration, what we hear from the council, is they want to address juvenile crime by presenting options to children in the community to do things other than run around and commit crime. Yeah. They want to intervene early on with at-risk youth and try to head that off. At the same time, they want to make sure that the NOPD is getting the resources it needs and is rebuilding its ranks, because it's at levels not seen in generations.
And that's a real challenge. And all right, we're going to have to move on. E, real quick, can you make that comment?
No, I was going to say, what adds to the frustration is the resignation of the police chief. So in the middle of all this, there's no police chief per se, no regular police chief, and not even agreement on how the next police chief is going to be selected. And this is when you need a police chief. This is when you need somebody taking the leadership and someone that can recruit people. And that's a big vacuum right now.
The mayor seems to have made her choice. It seems that Woodfork is her police chief because she's not making any effort to find any other candidate.
Okay, well, we'll be talking about this more. Thanks a lot, Dave. It's going over to you, Stephanie. And you had a piece about a tract of land where there used to be the Brown's Dairy, right there in Central City. It was supposed to have some affordable housing go up, but that's not happening.
No, it's really a fascinating story. And of course, affordable housing is a huge crisis in this city. And when the old developers of the former Brown's Dairy site sold the land off in 2018, one tract actually will be affordable housing. That's the parking lot site. There's an apartment building going up there that'll be affordable rental units built by the Gulf Coast Housing Partnership. But the block, a full city block where the actual milk processing plant was going to be, was acquired by a group of developers who had a really good idea to develop 2 family homes, a traditional New Orleans style double that would be available for purchase to low and moderate income home buyers. And this is key because a lot of affordable housing typically is rental units and you get a subsidy and you live in an apartment. But part of the problem is the need to create generational wealth, right? And so by giving them an opportunity to own an income producing property, they could live in one side and rent out the other. The council loved this idea. If you watched this council meeting from 2020, I mean, they're singing Kumbaya and this is like so great. They're tripping over themselves to congratulate these folks. But when push came to shove through 2021, the programs and perhaps some zoning help that these guys needed to make the project a reality didn't happen. And of course, nobody really wants to speak publicly about whose fault it was. Part of the problem is there really is not sufficient programming in place for affordable home ownership. It's easy to do the rent, not easy, but I mean, there are ways to do the rental projects, but to help somebody who's making $50,000 a year afford the note on a, say, $300,000 house, the money doesn't work unless they either get a break on their property taxes or they get some sort of mortgage assistance. There are programs out there, but it's not easy. It's not like a turnkey thing. And we have city agencies and state agencies that can put this together, but for some reason it didn't happen. There were also ways the developers could have lowered their cost, maybe if the city had picked up the tab for doing a cut through of Thalia Street, which the developers ended up paying for themselves. So I don't know. It didn't happen.
So now what's going there?
Right. So now what's going up is an entire block of short-term rentals. Luxury short-term rentals, 4 and 5 bedroom party houses. When the developers' plans fell through in late 21, they sold off the land in chunks, and more than half of it was acquired by a group that has one of these short-term rental platforms. They're very open about what they're doing. These houses are all built around like common swimming pools with second-floor balconies, and some of the proponents of this development have said, look, this was industrial land, it's zoned commercial, it allowed for short-term use, you know, unlike other historic neighborhoods, and so why not? This is a great use for what would have just been blighted property.
So council responded to this?
Yes, well, when they saw it on the front page of the paper, they were all of a sudden very upset about this. And so they took a special motion out of order at yesterday's council meeting to pass 2 motions that they're sending on now to the City Planning Commission for approval. But what they would do is basically 2 things. One would be citywide, and it would put some of that programming in place that I spoke about to make affordable home ownership easier. They also passed a zoning measure, but again, that needs City Planning Commission approval, that would prohibit short-term rentals on that block, which is a moot point because it's already going up, so those houses are grandfathered in, and also some surrounding blocks in the area. And this comes, of course, as the council is looking at short-term rentals and revising the rules in general. So this kind of comes into play as that is
Two
coming up.
problems, though, that they're seeing manifested in this.
Yeah.
One is it's so much easier for a property owner to do a short-term rental.
Of course.
And it's so much more lucrative.
Yeah.
The other problem is there's still huge demand for short-term rentals.
Yep.
So the public wants them. Property owners make huge profits off of them, but the council understandably wants to limit them because of their impact on neighborhoods. And I don't see this struggle ending anytime soon.
No.
And there's a great need for affordable housing. It looks like this was really a lost opportunity. For
It was
some
a
good affordable
tremendous
housing.
lost opportunity.
All right, and so they continue to struggle with it, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, the council does with short-term rental new rules and regulations that they're trying to impose also.
And so that came after that court order. Those are going to be rolled out in the weeks to come. We saw a draft of that yesterday, and we'll see, you know, we'll have hearings on that very, very soon. So there will be a lot of interesting battles in the
Okay,
council. as that
all right,
comes up.
Stephanie, thanks a lot. All right, Lottie, let's go on over to you. This week was Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday, observances for that, and you wrote about that in the news organization now. It's fairly new to our market. It's called Verite News. Tell us about it.
It's called Verite News. We are a brand new nonprofit newsroom in New Orleans, and our whole goal is to do long-form, in-depth narrative stories focused on communities that are usually underserved, or communities who are sometimes ignored by the mainstream press. That's one goal. The other mission is to train minority journalists. So we have college fellows in our newsroom. We also have recent grads in our newsroom,
Great.
who are doing on-the-ground reporting.
VeritéNews.org, in case you want to go find
Yes,
it. Okay, let's
Verité
talk
News.
about a story you had this week. You know, an important story, a wonderful story about Andrew Young, a son of New Orleans.
Right. So we were thinking about, how do we celebrate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday? I said, isn't Andy Young right here from New Orleans? Yes. And he's an international figure, right?
Right.
He was civil rights leader, top lieutenant of Dr. King, two-time mayor of Atlanta. He was a congressman and also a United Nations ambassador. But he got his start right here in New Orleans, attended elementary school, high school. I read that he went to Dillard for this long before transferring to Howard. But, you know, he told me that he grew up in a neighborhood where there was a Irish bar on one corner, an Italian grocery store, I might have those mixed up, on another corner. And he said, you know, he had to learn how to get along with people who were different from him from the very start. He talked about a nursery school he went to on Bienville. Am I pronouncing that right? Yes, Bienville. He said, they taught me how to read when I was 3 and 4 years old. But he said, I learned my diplomatic skills growing up in New Orleans. He had to negotiate with white Southern business owners. Every time they boycotted or went to do demonstrations in a city, a lot of people may not know that the civil rights leaders actually met with business leaders before they actually went into a city and marched or did demonstrations or protests. And so Andrew Young had the skill to actually negotiate with the Southern white business leaders. When he was a United Nations ambassador, he said those skills proved useful when I was a United Nations ambassador, because I had to know how to get along with people and talk to people from all over the world.
And of course, he worked very closely with Dr. King in the civil rights struggle. He was with Dr. King on that awful day.
He was with Dr. King. He has this story where he had been in court all day trying to get papers for them to march with the Memphis sanitation workers. They were in Memphis, Tennessee. And he comes back to the hotel, to the Lorraine Motel, and Dr. King says, Andy, where you been all day, right? And they started a pillow fight with the other civil. It was Ralph Abernathy and Andy Young and Dr. King. And he said they had been eating dinner. He's like, hey, where's my dinner, right? I've been in court all day. So he goes downstairs to speak with another civil rights leader, and Dr. King comes out on the balcony to get some fresh air. And before you know it, they hear pop, 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 pop around, and he sees Dr. King go down, and he runs up to the balcony. And you're right, the picture shows Andy Young with Dr. King on the balcony after he had been shot.
Pointing
Pointing the direction of where
the shooter was, that iconic picture.
Let me just mention his neighborhood from your story was on Galvez by Cleveland.
In Cleveland.
Around where the Veterans Hospital used to be,
Hospital.
that site.
That's the first thing he said. He said, do you know the Veterans Hospital in Cleveland? Near Canal, off Cleveland. I said, sure. And he said, I live right where the hospital sign is now. He said, that's where I used to live. And it's so ironic that when he first met Dr. King, before he was in the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, they said, oh, this is a bright young man. Maybe he can get our mail. Maybe he could sort our mail for us, right? So they thought, oh, he can, he's nice. But yet he proved to be a very valuable asset to Dr. King and the civil rights movement.
a dynamic leader, and it's still dynamic at age 90. You said?
90. He had, my interview with Andrew Young was at 2 p.m. that afternoon. Before that, he had 6 media interviews right before that, and he had spoken with a group of young people, of youth, right before. And I was number 7 or 8 in that long list.
Where's home now for him?
He's still in Atlanta, Georgia, right
I just
now.
want to mention that picture that came up was with Young, with Dr. King, at a meeting of the Southern Christian Leadership Council. I think it was in the 70s, but it was in Chicago. But you can tell he's the guy.
Dr. King died in 1968.
Yeah.
Oh, so
Right.
1960s, okay.
So it had to be earlier.
Like 60s.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
But you can tell he was the guy by his side.
He was right by his side, and he counted on Andrew Young for a lot of things.
A real leader. We could read your piece at veritenews.org. Is that right?
Absolutely.
VERITE news.org.
Verite means truth.
That's
So
right.
Please click on that.
It's great to have you here, Lottie.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. All right, Dave, back on over to you. And there was a divorce filing that got everybody's interest.
Well, yeah, and because it was the filing of Mayor LaToya Cantrell's bodyguard's wife, who claims in her divorce filings that in November she confirmed that her husband, Jeffrey Vappy, was having an extramarital affair with someone referred to in the filings as LC, LaToya Cantrell. Now, his lawyers have come out since and insisted that he has not admitted, as the filings would indicate, he has not admitted to that extramarital affair. They didn't deny he had it, they just said he hadn't admitted to it. And because that was kind of an interesting stepping stone that the legal community was looking at and saying, if it is now verified by affidavit in court filings that this extramarital affair did indeed occur, that opens the door for criminal prosecutors to now go after LaToya Cantrell for payroll fraud, because he was on the clock at the time that they were allegedly having this affair
At the Pontalba.
at the Pontalba and maybe elsewhere. So that's not what he was being paid for. That's not what the taxpayers were expecting for him to be doing. So if indeed that was the case, there you have payroll fraud. You also have a number of other issues, malfeasance on part of the mayor that could be pursued by a state or federal prosecutor. And the civil implications are huge too, obviously. When you have any supervisor who is having sexual relations with an employee, then you open up all of those doors to harassment and other civil charges or allegations that could be brought in court filings.
Now, that claim was part of an amended filing. The original divorce filing was right after these reports surfaced in the fall of last year, right?
Correct. She filed an amended petition for divorce, and in it, that was where she said she had learned in November that LC and her husband were having this affair. And it, based on the reporting we've already seen, we know they spent a lot of time together, which you would expect from a mayor and their bodyguard.
Right.
But the video evidence of them going in and out of the Pontalba, the two of them, just the two of them, all hours of the night, at odd times, it just all seems to support the
Long
allegation.
hours during the day,
Right.
too.
And neither the mayor nor Vappy have actually denied the allegations that they were having an affair, nor have they confirmed it. But and the other question is, even if this does open the door for criminal prosecution, who would prosecute?
Yes.
We haven't heard from either anyone locally on the state level or the federal level of an active investigation. Now, we know Karen Carter Peterson, after her arrest, was cooperating with federal authorities. The presumption by many legal experts is that LaToya Cantrell, the mayor of New Orleans, is the target of whatever information she has. That has not been confirmed yet, but we'll wait and we'll see on that. The federal government has to get permission from the Justice Department in Washington to go after a sitting politician. We know that hasn't happened yet.
All right.
So there's no formal investigation on the federal level.
Did you have a question?
Well, I just want to qualify real quickly that in her comments, Cantrell said, well, this is sexist, that this would never happen if it was a male. Well, I can tell you that I can think of 3 examples of fairly recent mayors, all males, that there were rumors out there about some kind of liaison, 2 congressmen. One had to resign from Congress, another decided not to run for office again. And the most famous was Earl Long when he was governor, and it was documented he was dating a stripper, Blaze Starr. They even made a movie out of it, okay? And so this is not just limited to females. I mean, if you're a person of power, you're
the difference now is the video surveillance.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. We got to make a quick switch over here for just to wrap up with Stephanie, and you just have a real short amount of time, I'm afraid, now about Municipal Auditorium.
Big step of the Cantrell administration moving forward with long, much-needed remediation work of the Morris FX Jeff Municipal Auditorium. This is with $37 million in FEMA money that the city fought with FEMA over for years, involved litigation. The money finally cleared, did an RFP last fall, awarded the contract a couple of weeks ago to architecture firm Burgess Rome Architects along with Nano Architecture, and they have the contract now to design a plan for the remediation and the fix-up work, and then they'll bid out those contracts in the months to come. But it's a really important step because it will protect this building from further weather damage, fixing the roof, fixing the windows, restoring it, all that stuff that happened to it after Katrina and has happened to it since.
And that's a deadline for that FEMA money, too. This
has to be a plan and has to be in place and on the road to being implemented by like the end of this summer.
to do this first phase, to use this money, to use this FEMA's
money. Yeah. And then beyond that, a larger plan will come out to reimagine uses for the auditorium once it's fixed up.
All righty. Okay, great. Other stories, E.
Okay, well, all the worry about Carnival, it looks good for the parades now. During the week, the 2 chairs of the Mayor's Mardi Gras Committee, which are Elroy James from Zulu and James Reese from Rex, put out a statement saying they're making good progress. The city's agreed to pay money to compensate the police equal to the volunteer people they'll get. And apparently they're getting progress in finding police from other places. So that whole thing is looking better now.
That's good. Steph.
A story that we found that was really interesting. Iron Mountain, a document storage company, is holding hostage some city records because the city won't pay its bills. And the city has lost these records. They claim not to know how many records it even is, and they can't tell us. But this is impacting, say, litigation. These are records that are needed in like a suit that the city needs to defend itself involving a police officer. So it's just a little thing when you've got murders and crime and all sorts of other things. But it speaks to a government that like isn't functioning so well.
Okay. Lottie.
So the Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office has been destroying its deputies' disciplinary records. This piece was produced by Richard Webster, who is on our investigative team. And the whole point of, for more than a decade, he's just been destroying records that should have been kept on file for state archives.
Okie doke. Real quick, Dave.
Sean Payton is interviewing for other head coaching jobs in the NFL. Saints fans should hope he gets hired somewhere by a team that has a high draft pick, because the Saints will probably get it and really help New Orleans next year.
And not get some money, too, out of that contract. Okay. All right. Thanks for joining us, guys. Thank you all for being here, too. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
Is made possible in part by Susie and Pierre G. Villery.
With a continued passion for public television, we are proud to underwrite Informed Sources.
Please join us in supporting WYES Television.